polynomials and stuff. Yeah. And I was having a lot of difficulties, and I was asking my mom for help, and she's very well educated, and she was like, why are you doing it in that way? Like, there's more effective ways. She was teaching me this like way to do it. Like, it's like pretty much like a formula that she learned when she was in middle school. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that is so difficult, but we do it like this and this and this, mother. Yeah. So I ended up like going back to the way I was like taught in like school, because it was difficult for me to teach her what I do not like barely understood. Mm-hmm. And so like I see that a lot happening with parents now, like where parents are like, oh, like elementary math, I can't totally help you with that, son. And then they look at it and they're like, huh, like since when did I learn that, right? Yeah. And then the way they do it is such like so novel and new at this point, where like the parents are even like have to learn it from their students first and then kind of teach them. So I feel like going back to past experience, it's like you keep the good experience and like the way they approached it, but you do not like take the way they taught you. Yeah. You know, if you know what I mean, like if you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, totally, because like.
Because it's old, like it's outdated.
It's like industrial, you know.
And that's a good point too. Curriculum change should be based off of research and like pedagogy and like the effective ways to teach people, and not just what we learned in school. So yeah. I think that's really important as like we're in college, is to learn more about like our students and like the effect, like scaffolding. Like that's something that maybe we were never aware of, but it's a really important like part of like teacher training that we need to incorporate into our own teaching.
Which kind of like makes me wonder, like to what point can we like individually like tailor, like I guess like alter, like accommodate to a student, you know, to their individual need, like where it doesn't look like a favoritism.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Because like entire reason why I got that question was because like I was thinking back to my past experience, and my high school teacher, I had him for like 3 years straight. It's very very interesting because like when I was in his class, I wasn't as good as like in English. So but it was a history class where it was a lot of reading, a lot of like writing and stuff. And I was very stressed. I actually got like first quarter in that class, I got an F on it, and we were like, what happened, right? And then so I was talking to him, and he's like, okay, like, and then he knew I was okay, like I'm good at drawing. So he's like, why don't you express like the historical moment? Like we have to write like an essay of like historical moments, and then kind of like summarize it every week or so. And then so what he did is instead like have a artwork ready and have an artist statement, which is like a paragraph long. And then so as kind of like time went on, like he would ask me to write 2 paragraphs instead of 1, and kind of increase the paragraph amount as well as the artwork, and I really enjoyed doing the artwork. And then I thought it was a very interesting way to go around the standards. But then again, also to other students, like for their point of view, it might look like I'm his favorite in the sense where he was like kind of, instead of writing 5-paragraph essay, I'm writing 1 paragraph and getting like same grade level at like, you know,
like she doesn't have to do as much work kind of thing.
Stuff happened, and then so I was like, it really helped me. But like when my friends understood too with the struggle, and they were really nice. All my classmates were like understanding. But I feel like if I were in some other situation, would I have been like as understanding if I were in like in my friend's situation? And I was like, that's a really good balance to have. So.
It's a good question.
And I remember in Education 108, it's just like a very similar thing, but like learning about that accommodation. And there was like a story from a teacher where they're a history teacher, and a student that they were teaching wasn't paying attention at all, like wasn't into it at all, but they always like just wanted to read like novels and like maybe like romantic novels or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, and like not romantic, but like, you know,
Twilights.
just like that kind of,
Twilights.
and the teacher like looked up, asked the librarian for like books that like had these themes, but also took place in this time period and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
And like this location to like get the kid to like, the student to like, you know, pay attention to class because it relates back to something like that. You pay attention to, you know, history because it relates back to drawing, you know.
That's cool. I think that's really interesting examples of like tailoring to the students' like needs and interests.
Exactly. not all things are tailorable too though, cause that's like, you know, like art and reading are kind of like easier, but like if a kid's like into math and you want them to like write an essay, you can't just be like, write it as an equation. You know?
I'm one for
Mhm.
Did you
one.
say
Yeah,
a
exactly.
question, Oscar?
No, kind of want to move on.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
What time is that for now?
We've had about 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in my section, I'll just briefly mention this, but one thing I had to look up was communicative competence, which is
Mhm.
having the ability and knowledge to use language appropriately in different social situations. So basically, this happens a lot in other cultures. Like if you're not from their culture, then you're not gonna understand like what is deemed like okay or not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then she kind of had me like do an example too, and I couldn't really think of a lot, but I kind of thought of one that was kind of related to a misunderstanding, but also like I don't know if you guys have ever like experienced this, but like or something similar where like, because in my example I was like listening to somebody and they were talking about like them having a bad day, and then they made a joke, and so like you start laughing, but then you realize like you could see that they're like not
Yeah.
joking, and so then you're like, oh crap, like, and so you change your like demeanor, I guess. I don't know if you guys have ever like had something like that happen
No,
to you.
yeah, I've had things like that.
And it's like it's weird how you like notice it like internally like really quickly that something's like not matching up, I guess. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think that's related for like, that's interesting because that definitely relates to like English language learners and then like their experiences with learning English in a classroom and like using it in a classroom. Because the English you might learn in social situations might be different than the English that you use to write an essay. And that's
Definitely.
definitely
Yeah.
something that you have to discuss with people too, is like there's a lot of really like small language details in like writing that people don't necessarily learn right away. They get kind of like cultured to, I guess. But
And we basically know like multiple ways of speaking, which I think is so interesting. We know how to speak in like a social manner, and then we also know how to speak in like an essay and things. I think it's really interesting, like that those are like two completely different ways of speaking, and we can do them all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like we're not even aware of it
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
but like people who aren't like accustomed to it, like they have to learn it.
Mhm.
But we like just do it, and we don't even realize or have to think
Yeah.
about it, I guess.
well, it just like kind of pertains to like the example with Yvonne, because like she was like teaching Spanish even to people in the United States, but was like, oh, what kinds of things do you need to learn Spanish for? Or when she was teaching English to people that spoke other languages, she was like, well, what are you using like English for? So like she kind of like built like a like language competence around like their needs and interests, which I thought was pretty
Oh, okay.
helpful.
Hmm.
Especially for like adults too. Like if you're an adult learning English in the United States, you probably have specific needs for why you want to
Yeah.
use it. But you may not need to use it for other things like academic stuff or
I remember reading that part where she was teaching the adults how to speak English. But when I read about the communicative
I don't know how to
competence.
Yeah.
communicative, cumulative,
whatever.
communicative competence, it reminded me of like, because in the final article that we had to read, I believe it was the final for like number 5. No, number 5 was video. For number 4.
oh yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around that area.
Yeah, I wrote about language as action.
Yeah, me too.
You did too?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that just kind of reminded me a lot about that. And in the part talking about language as action, it talks about, there was like an example given where like a teacher, like an English teacher gives their students an assignment, and it's all about projects basically, is like using what you know in action rather than like in practice. And so they have to write like 5 letters to people that they know describing about like their language, the language and stuff, and like basically like it wasn't graded on, like grammatical correctness and stuff like that. It was kind of graded on like, is this kid like growing by knowing that like they're using this in an applicable way, and then like, they're just like competent of like how language is.
Yeah. That was like related to when they wanted us to look like standards like Common Core standards and how they related to something that you might do in the classroom, I used language as action and connected it to ELL standards for speaking and listening, which is exactly about being engaged with groups and your peers in the classroom and like what skills you need to have in different grades to apply that. I thought that was really interesting. I'm just checking the bus really quick.
Go for it. I'm looking for some questions.
Yeah, what were your guys' like sections for like, or if you had any interesting like things?
Yeah, I mean, I had some interesting things on mine. I mean, there's things that could have been answered with the reading, so I'm just gonna tell you guys things you probably already know. I got to talk about spontaneous and scientific concepts and cognitive apprenticeship. I got to talk about the definitions of those.
Okay.
And I just thought it was pretty interesting, spontaneous concepts. We were talking about, you guys mentioned something earlier about when you talked about the joke, the joking thing. Like that reminded me a lot about what I had to like read about for this section. And basically, like spontaneous concepts are different from scientific concepts. Like spontaneous concepts are like the things that the individual learns, like in their community setting, like their environment. Like, oh, like you do this, you do that. Like we were talking about it earlier, how like learning, like last week I think it was, like just like external. You know, you need like an external something to learn it. And then scientific concepts are actually like really things that require like instruction. So like they're like spontaneous concepts are things you just learn on your own. Like I call them like what I kind of thought about it was like spontaneous concepts are like what you learn just by living.
Yeah.
And scientific concepts, and like they mentioned it. I read like this article as well on the side, just because I was having like, okay, what is this? And basically, it says scientific concepts like are what kind of like, what exactly did it say? Like awaken the higher uses of the brain. So for example, like without being educated and stuff and going to school, like we learn just how to do human things, right? We learn how to like treat people, we learn how to like socialize, learn how to basically kind of in a way survive. It's not until we start going to school we start learning all these like kind of like abstract concepts and stuff and actually using our brain to like its full capacity. And that's kind of what scientific concepts are. And then cognitive apprenticeship is just like teaching. It's like a person who knows their craft and it's the process of them teaching someone who doesn't know that craft. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, I just thought that like what they were talking about with the scientific concept was really interesting. I also got to learn about the functions of language, and then the ones that the thing asked me to like talk about were referential, expressive, and integrative. And I wanted to see what you guys had to think about these. So a referential function of language is like the ability to speak about something. So like reference something, talk about something. Like yeah, you know, like that's one of our functions of language. Expressive is obvious, like how am I feeling? Like this is how I feel, emotions. Integrative was really interesting. It's like the unifying. Like it's like language, a job of language also is to unify, create community. You know? And I thought that was also really interesting.
The thing when you say unify, what I picture in my head was politics. Sorry, but like I guess like for an example, I guess is like I don't know if this like is like the right kind of example, I guess, but for like what will unify like a Democratic Party will like not be unifying to like a different kind of party because they have like different values. So like different kinds of I guess groups will have different kinds of like integrative unifying things, I guess.
That's a good example because language and rhetoric is definitely really powerful in politics. It's most of politics.
Yeah.
But one thing I'm kind of curious about is how might expressive language functions and integrative be different, because I kind of see like they must be tied together. Like to be able to build community with somebody, you need to be able to express who you are and like how you're feeling.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is just like the functions. So like a function is to be able to express your feelings. Another function is to be able to like unify. Like yeah, like the expressiveness of this could eventually lead to speak. Like you kind of have to look at it like individually.
Okay.
Well, did you want to say something else?
Like, I feel like the difference would be like, while expressive is more about feeling, like integrative is more like riling people up, like as group. So like they would have a motivation for it, and that motivation could be like feeling driven or like money, like, you know, interest driven and something like that. But like there will be like something driven to them that kind of keeps them together. Whether like if there's a topic, it's like someone could feel like hate for it, while someone would be angry, but it's not necessarily, I guess, like same feeling to it. But they will still like rile up for like same cause, while expressive would be more of like feeling is what I would like draw the lines on.
Well, I mean, when I think about like when I was reading through this, the first thing that came to my mind was just like biology, humans. So the whole unifying is like, that's how we know that people are like a group, a kin, because they speak the same language. You know, that's how I was like, yeah, unifying. Like French people speak French, like they are like they might have, you know, but they're like a community. They're you know, we speak English, we're a community.